And it's alright with me. It's alright with me. It's alright with me.
I'm Karis Painter. This is Moves Unfiltered. We explore the dance communities of Philadelphia. We learn how dance is a vehicle of culture, conveying traditions, music, and history. I'm a dancer, an advocate, a storyteller. Come with us as we explore Moves Unfiltered. I'm Karis Painter. This is Usula Media. We're on Moves Unfiltered, and I'm pleased to have our guest today, Mamta, to talk about volunteering and commitment to voter issues in the state of Pennsylvania. Welcome.
Thanks, Karis. I'm excited to be here.
I'm glad you could make it. So we met from a group that was doing postcard writing. Could you talk a little bit about your interest and what got you involved originally in this?
Sure. So, like many of us, I was very shocked and taken aback by the 2016 election results. And so I pledged that I could no longer just be ignorant of what was going around and naive. I needed to get involved in whatever way I could do. So when the 2018 midterm elections came around, I heard about the opportunity to write letters through Vote Forward and to write postcards through an organization called Postcards to Voters. And I wrote as many as I could that time. And I pledged to myself that when 2020 came around, I would do the same and actually exceed the amount that I had done in 2018. And I actually found more organizations to write through, like the one Karis, which we both write for, and then some more targeted campaigns, which actually makes me feel even better because I feel like I'm reaching new audiences, just not a limited amount of people.
Are you only writing to voters in Pennsylvania or other states?
So I have some for Michigan, and then I'm writing for Pennsylvania, and then specifically the city of Philadelphia. Those are the two places.
So what's the interest in postcard writing and or letter writing versus other kind of volunteer opportunities? What is it about writing that interests you?
Well, I think in today's society, we're so used to having everything being digital, like text messaging, emails, like Skype messaging, that I think that the value of having a handwritten note actually makes someone pause and see, like, oh wait, somebody actually took the time to read, like, write me a personal postcard. What does it say? And gives them a chance to reflect on it versus on a screen where you could just click delete or mark something as spam. So that was one. And two, I know there are different ways to get involved, like phone banking, canvassing, text campaigns. But I thought that when I write messages, it's a lot harder to do in one way because you're trying to write all these postcards in a short amount of time. So I figured that, you know what, let me just get involved in the way that I feel the most comfortable at this time. And I'm probably going to be moving on to text campaigning as soon as I finish the current batch of postcards that I have.
Absolutely. I agree with you very much so about people spend so much time on digital devices. They're bombarded with emails, and that it is really nice to get something, especially handwritten, not just in the mail, but that it's handwritten by someone and the message feels very personalized. I have received letters that have my first name on it and it's handwritten, and you know that someone has taken the time to do this. Yeah, it is a good feeling. I think also, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, there is so much information out there for people who are on social media, who their work or their social life is already on devices. But there are a lot of people, especially in the state of Pennsylvania, who don't spend a lot of time on devices, or they're in a bracket, an older generation that isn't their life. So I think it's a great way to reach those people as well.
I agree completely. I mean, I can tell from some of the addresses that I'm writing to, like they're in community homes or assisted care facilities. And, just I'm sure that they would feel happy to get something handwritten and also, finding information through another source. Because I feel like we're all so ingrained to think the way that we do that we sometimes don't take the step to step back and actually think, wait, what are the things that are important to me and how can I become an informed voter instead of just voting party line blindly.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you brought that up, because I believe this is the first time in the state of Pennsylvania that on a presidential ballot there isn't a straight party line vote, which some people agree with, some people disagree with. But I guess it goes more to what you're talking about, of people being informed and really understanding why they're picking which candidate.
Exactly. And I mean, and I can admit that I was one of these, like in the group of people who just would vote party line, not really be involved like with midterm elections, not pay attention to the down ballot races. I mean, yes, we do have a presidential election coming up, but there's so many other key races that are at stake. I mean, you have Senate races, the House of Representatives reelects every 2 years, so the entire House is up. And then you have your local state senates and House of Representatives, and even like as down to your sheriff for your county. Like there's so many other elections that are happening. And I think that the people who are in the group of, oh, okay, I'm only going to pay attention to the presidential election, don't realize there's a lot more at stake. And I'm sure, as you know, Karis, but I mean, this election's more important than ever because we have an aging Supreme Court, and it's already been unbalanced in the sense of people who are more conservative versus the more liberal train of thought. And losing RGB was just like a sucker punch to me. Like I was so upset and sad. And now hearing who the choice will be to replace her, it seems like polar opposites. So, I mean, that's another thing, that even though we don't vote for our Supreme Court justices, our vote for the people that we do vote for represent and have input onto who our next judges will be. And these are lifetime appointees. It's not like, oh, every 4 to 6 years. I mean, they're on for life.
Absolutely. I'm curious if there is a particular issue or cause that is close to your heart that you feel is especially important in this election, or in general that's important to you when you're thinking about who makes the laws, who makes the policies.
That's a good question. So I think the first thing, I have two, but the main one is the environment and climate protections. I mean, every year you keep hearing how the temperatures keep getting hotter and hotter and like beating the records that have been kept from when they first started keeping records. And then you hear about the tornadoes, the wildfires, and there's so many things that the environment or like the planet suffers due to what we as the human race do to it. So I'm very passionate about, clean waters, preserving forest land, trying to move towards more sustainable packaging. Like, I mean, cutting out as much plastic as I can. And I know that President Obama had signed a bunch of different executive orders to help protect the water, the trees, like, increasing the fuel emission standards. And when the current president came into term, he rolled back a lot of them in favor of the argument of saying it's deregulation. And with the more deregulation we have, the higher the amount of profits that we can make. And I truly feel like we're ambassadors to the earth. Like we shouldn't pillage or destroy the planet in name of profits over our future generations.
Absolutely. And talking more about climate change and the commitment to the environment, the US under the current president decided to leave the Paris Agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it was the only country that has left that was once a part of it. So that's a big thing.
It is. I mean, I think the implications are even more than just the environment. I mean, what they agreed to in the Paris Accord. I mean, it's the fact that we entered an agreement and we just backed out, like in terms of reliability or in terms of like being ethical for honoring what was previously signed. I think that was like also a huge blow to our credibility.
Do you think in Philadelphia or the communities that you are a part of, there's certain issues that are more salient that people care more about in this election?
Well, I think that's a really good question. Like I've noticed that the people like that I've spoken to, because I have spoken to people from both sides of the party, and a lot of times the people, I mean, it's immigration that comes up a lot, and the other one being taxes, where people think that automatically a Democratic candidate's going to bump up their taxes and they're going to pay more. But in reality, if you actually look at the numbers, it's people who make over $400,000 a year under Biden's plan would be affected, and it's a 1% increase. So that's number one, which I feel like the misinformation's out there. Number two is on immigration. I really feel like the attitude towards immigration and immigrants has turned really negative, and it's viewed as, oh, people coming in to steal our jobs and we're unemployed, but then people come here from Mexico or any other country and they take up our opportunities, which isn't really true. It's already so difficult to get a green card to come to the US or like even get like the H-1B visa. There's so many requirements and hoops they have to jump through. So I think that people don't understand how hard that process is already, and then having an administration that's making it even harder and cutting quotas.
And if I'm correct, you told me off air that you're a part of the South Asian community.
Yes.
Is that something, immigration, that has come up in their conversations about voting in this election?
So it's interesting that you say that, because I actually know a lot of people who are here in the US on H-1B visas. And one of my friends who's very involved politically, but sadly he can't vote because he's not a citizen. He doesn't even have his green card yet. And he's been in the US for over 10 years. And he said that the queues are so long in order to, like, it's estimated in 12 years he'll get his green card. And then he's been telling me that with all the new restrictions to the number of even visas, that he's just going to move to Canada because he can't keep dealing with the stress and anxiety of our current political process. And then the other thing is, I mean, I know a lot of older South Asian Americans. Sadly, I think that they're again thinking just along party lines, thinking Democrats more taxes and more that'll affect them negatively. But the younger generation, I think, is what's going to make the change, because people are more open to say, okay, if something will cost me more at the store, but it means that it's better for the planet, so be it. Or if we allow more immigrants in, that's how our country was founded. Everybody who came here, except for the Native Americans, are immigrants, like our ancestors are, and they take that more, like they take a more holistic approach.
Definitely. You brought up the point of when people think of issues that will affect their vote, that they often think of their own individual cases, but also the point of the broader context in terms of we're not just voting for ourselves, but for the broader community. Climate change is a perfect example, where maybe an older voter we could argue wouldn't necessarily care so much. And maybe that's also the work that needs to be done, is not just talking about specific policies that influence individuals and their vote, but what does it look like for the American public, for the greater world population, when we're talking about candidates.
Exactly. It's so important. I mean, I feel like honestly, it's a shame being a first world country and you see Europe designing, like they're so efficient with things over there. Environmentally, I feel like they're so much ahead of the US and even Canada adopting. And it's like, why can't we also be an ambassador to the planet?
Absolutely. I think I just read today that it was either today or yesterday that Canada has on the books a plan to eliminate the use of single-use plastics in the next X amount of years.
That's amazing.
Which now that so many people are doing takeout because of the pandemic and using disposable masks, where it almost feels that we're going backwards.
No, I mean, I don't know if you are familiar with the zero waste movement, but there are individuals who try to create as little waste as possible. One of them, and I forget her name, she's like considered like one of the earliest candidates who adopted that, said that this was the first time she had to buy packaged food and had waste for over 10 years because times were so uncertain and she had to put her, personal safety first. But I think that just as normally, I mean, you see, we're very much a society of excess. We have plastic bags, that are just used once and thrown in the trash. You see straws littered all over, where somebody, I mean, and I can understand if you have a disability, you need to use straws, but I think it's just become like the norm. And recycling, I don't know, like if you, I mean, a lot of people don't even follow like the basic recycling rules. And it's become so much harder for companies to be motivated to even continue to have recycling because it's not being sold. Like our trash is not being sold as much as it used to because of standards.
Absolutely. I want to say it was National Geographic, but perhaps it was another news or media outlet that did a story on how big oil had a major role in plastic, and this idea that plastic could be easily recyclable, when in reality that's just not true, that it's much 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 more complicated, and what plastic can be recycled is such a small percentage of what we actually use.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's and you see that probably living in South Philly, the amount of I lived in South Philly and I was amazed at that there in Philly in general, there's no requirement to use regular trash cans for trash. So the plastic bags would
Oh yeah.
trash would just be blowing in the wind if it was a windy day. It's nuts actually.
And right now, I mean, it's interesting because I don't know if you've heard of this, Karis, but they're behind in collecting trash and recycling because the trucks are getting full because they can't even complete their entire route, which they used to be able to do in a day because there's been such an increase in waste that the garbage truck gets full and then they have to sometimes collection gets pushed by a week even. So sometimes you're just walking around and you see all these recycling bins and trash cans stuffed to the brim.
Absolutely. Yes, and I believe the mayor told people at one point to stop with home construction because they were generating so much waste, and you can just, Philly doesn't have as strict rules on waste disposal as other cities, and so
Yep.
people would just leave these mounds of construction materials on the corner, and it would stay for weeks waiting for those trucks to come by.
Yeah, it's
Nuts. So, shifting back towards the postcards and the campaign to get people to register to vote and to get them out voting during a pandemic. You mentioned you were involved in ones with different causes or motivations. I'm curious what those are. I know the swing state voter ones, which are the
that's the
ones
one
I
we're
was,
doing
yeah.
together.
Those are targeting not only registered voters, but newly registered voters. And we don't send them out until the end, basically the middle to the end of October, with the thinking behind it that they're already committed to voting. This is just that last nudge.
Or like a last minute reminder to be like, hey, elections
Definitely.
next week.
Have
But
you
that
heard of other ones that have different motivations for the postcards or letters?
so voting, I mean, the one that I'm writing for right now is an organization called Next Gen. And what they actually did was they purchased 2012 voting. I mean, they did some sort of search and they took 2012 voting records, I mean, addresses of registered voters, and they matched it against who didn't vote in like
Mm,
2016 and 2018. So the goal of, okay, telling people who are registered that, hey, we noticed you didn't vote in 2016, your vote would have mattered, so please make a plan to um, vote up in on November 3rd. And if you're like or make a plan, so if you're going to request an absentee ballot or another way of voting, it's just like a gentle nudge to be like, hey, you didn't vote in the last presidential election or midterm, like with the goal of getting them to come out. And then there's another one that I did. I actually, it's funny because this time I didn't do Postcards to Voters, which is an organization, which is probably the most well-known organization for writing postcards. I actually signed up through mobilize.us
Mhm.
for another one through a camp, like through a local congressman in Michigan, where they just needed help when writing postcards. And they just sent me a list of addresses and they didn't even really tell me what to write, which was a little strange. Um, but they were just like, we just want to get turnout. So can you just please send addresses to these 50 people? I mean, send postcards to these 50 addresses. And that one, I just kind of tailored it more to, hey, your vote is your voice, and it does make a difference. And that elections can turn just on a couple hundred, I mean, on a couple votes. Like yours could be the changing vote. And also just to be aware of what's on the line. You know, like if you believe in science, vote for leaders who believe in it too. If you're passionate about climate change, vote for leaders who align on your views. So that's what I tried in that campaign to do. And then the other one I've done in the past is Vote Forward, which is actually probably out of all the campaigns the most organized, where they have a letter that you print out and it has space for you to write a sentence or two about why you think voting is important. And then they have like a URL on the bottom for recipients, and they can, if they wish, they can track, go online, put in that specific code and say whether the letter impacted them or not. So actually you can see real-time results of what your efforts are leading to.
That's really interesting that people can see that.
Yeah, I mean, so you're like, okay, I really want to do this. And, you know, I'm curious to see out of all the letters I sent out, did I make an, I feel like if you make an impression on one person, like that's enough of
That's
a validation.
absolutely. I was calling voters back before the primary to urge them. They had requested ballots to urge them to return them. And obviously, not everybody picks up the phone, but for the people that did, it was a very valuable moment where they received information. And again, it's another vote that counts.
Exactly. It's awesome that you were doing that.
Yeah, it was, people are some people tend to be a little afraid of calling people that they're going to hang up or be angry, but there's a lot of campaigns out there that only target specific groups or only target, Democratic voters. And so they're probably not going to yell their head off at you because they're already aligned with a certain party.
That's a good point. So I
Yeah.
think we should kind of make a plug though that if you do like talking to people and you have the time that, even as you said, mentioned to me, Karis, you can sign up for a 30-minute slot to do some calls when you have
Absolutely.
free time during the day.
Absolutely. And when you sign up, whether you sign up for whatever specific amount of time, once you make one call, you can stop. Nobody is holding you to the hour. Generally, people find that once they have a good call, they keep going unless they have other time constraints.
A good point.
So we're going to take a quick break for a commercial. This has been a great talk. When we come back, let's talk a little bit more about how we can get people out and some of the campaign signs that I have seen down in South Philly and other parts of Philly.
Sounds good.
So we'll be back in a short moment. I'm Karis Painter. This is Moves Unfiltered. Very pleased to have Mamta here today to talk about getting people out to volunteer and to vote. We'll be back in a minute.
Our hearts are made stronger by how we treat others.
Put her there.
The light you share can impact those around you, but so can the darkness.
Later, twerps.
Did Pete saying mean things bother ya?
So when you reach out to another person, take a moment to consider how they will feel and let your heart be the key to making a difference. Because of you, someone's entire day, year, or even life can change.
In every heart, there's hope.
Sometimes the things we do or say can make others feel hurt, excluded, or isolated. Everything you say and do creates an impact.
How am I supposed to save the whole world?
You can't think about saving the world. You have to think about saving one person.
Because of you, someone's entire life can change. You don't have to be a superhero to have a positive impact.
Friends?
Friends.
Media. Today we're joined by Mamta, who is a volunteer, talking about her work and what is really important in today's world to get out and vote. Welcome back.
Thanks.
So let's talk a little bit. You were talking about having a voting plan, and I'm so glad that you said that, because I have seen these huge signs throughout Philly, West Philly, South Philly, on phone poles that say vote, make a plan. Do you have any idea who put them up or where they came from?
No, but I'm glad that, that's another avenue of getting the word out. So whoever did, thank you very much.
Absolutely. It's great to see it. They're very big. They're normally where people put those signs, we buy houses, and to see them in neighborhoods that don't even have grocery stores. It's really inspiring. Whoever, I'm going to have to do some research. Whoever is putting those signs out for make a plan, have a voting plan campaign. You also mentioned, I want to ask you about this, that you know of these postcard campaigns, and I believe you said you were part of it, that were targeting voters that maybe didn't vote in 2016. Are you hearing or seeing in your group of friends, or just from people in general, that there are people who are still sitting out this election?
Sadly, I do know a couple of people who just think that their vote doesn't make a difference. And I've tried to say, point to data, and these are people, Karis, that are in swing states. So I know people from Michigan and Georgia who they're just like, I'm not voting because everybody is the same and my vote doesn't make a difference. And it really disappoints me, because I try to point out that, hey, this is a really crucial election, and that people fought for the right to vote, right? And it's kind of disrespecting all the hard work that went into the ability for us, especially as a female and a person of color, to be able to have that right.
Absolutely.
But on the flip side, I've actually also talked to one of my friends who didn't vote in the last presidential election or in the midterms, and he's actually registered to vote for this election, and he's requested his absentee ballot. So those are the things that make me, feel like everything we do is worth it. And as you know, we're part of some Facebook groups, and the encouragement level of seeing other people who have the same thoughts and are working just harder, even as hard or harder than us. I mean, it's really refreshing, and it's really heartwarming to see people say, oh, well, my husband's voted straight down the line for the past 50 years, and this is the first year he's he's changing platforms and he's excited to vote. I mean, it just makes you feel so good, and is a sign, like a beacon of positivity, with all the mudslinging and all the negativity that's in our climate today.
Absolutely. And they do say, research, that having a friends group, almost like some kind of phone chain back to the days when we had snow days, that connecting through friends and contacts and encouraging them to vote and talking about issues is really one of the best ways to get people out voting and to even influence who they vote for.
Yep.
It's when you were talking about people changing maybe where they, or the person or the party that they voted for previously, and now shifting that. I read an article that in Pennsylvania, especially, putting up the signs for either Trump or Pence in yards makes such a difference, that the yard signs, especially in areas that may have gone, let's say, red for the last election, and slowly, once one person puts out a sign, another person puts out a sign, it makes people open up and feel that they can even talk about who they're voting for.
No, I agree. I mean, I'm in an area of Pennsylvania right now. I'm not in the city, but I've been so disheartened because I've only seen, I think it's been 3 or 4 Trump signs, and I haven't seen a single sign for Biden.
Mm.
So, I mean, as you say, like, and these are on busy roads where people go and drive by. I'm like, if somebody just put up a Biden sign, maybe other people would be more comfortable, as you said, putting their signs out as well.
Absolutely. I guess that it comes from the idea that when people feel they're not the only one, they feel more open and free to express their thoughts.
Exactly.
And it goes to that whole point that the way I was raised, that you didn't talk about politics, that was not something that was brought up. It was never brought up in school, current politics, although we had those little election ballot boxes in elementary school on election day. But overall, politics was never talked about. And maybe that's where some of that fear emanates from as well.
Yep. It's like, don't talk about religion or politics was always like ingrained to me, like when with your coworkers or even your friends.
Absolutely. It is inspiring. You mentioned the social media groups and people, showcasing how many postcards they write, or the personal stories of talking to their neighbors. And I think that also encourages people who might not have volunteered or done anything in the past, and they feel so much more motivated this year. I would say I have seen a huge difference in the motivation levels.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've and I like, as you mentioned, I'm part of the South Asian community. I've seen so many initiatives just taken on from people from, the area, I mean, where my ancestors or my parents grew up, and they're just doing targeted campaigns to target, Asian Americans to make sure that their voices are heard. And like, if they don't speak English, they ask for people who can speak, whether it's Hindi, Mandarin, Cantonese, to help do some of the like phone banking and text banking to make sure that everyone's getting the message this year. And that's been also very inspiring, because I can't remember the last time I've seen that much, the level of outreach.
Absolutely. On Washington Avenue, I have seen the Vietnamese community especially make an effort to register voters. I see posters in Vietnamese with QR codes that people can scan with their phones to access information to register to vote. And that's so crucial for those communities that maybe have a language barrier.
And actually, for the first time, I think it was last week, I went to see my primary care doctor, and they had a sign inside the actual like patient room where it said, do you have a plan to vote? If not, scan this QR code. 2, you have registered to vote but don't know how to get an absentee ballot, scan this code. Or 3, you just need more information on what's going on and to get informed. And there was another QR code, and I've never ever seen that before in a doctor's office. So I thought that was really progressive, and it was a simple sign, nothing fancy. It wasn't affiliated with any party. It was just like, hey, this is the stuff. If you're interested in knowing, just we'll take you to this website, which will tell you everything you need to know.
Absolutely. And that, I think, goes to the whole mental health aspect and holistic health, that your health is not just vital signs and tests from a doctor, that it's so much more than that.
Yep. I mean, the other thing, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt,
That's
is that
okay.
I think in terms of the medical perspective, as you mentioned, is actually interesting because of, Medicare and Medicaid in terms of what's on the line for the next president and what their plans are. So, I mean, as you know, everything has to get paid from somewhere. And so in a short term, cutting the payroll tax and saying that it's temporary right now, but you want to make that permanent. It's like that's the tax that funds all these things that take care of our people, like of lower income households and also elderly households. And at the end of the day, somebody has to pay for it, so if they don't have health insurance and they go to the hospital and they can't pay their bill, the costs rise for all of us to cover that, versus if they had, access to a program which gave them basic health care.
Absolutely. So we only have about 4 minutes. But in that time, I'm very curious because 2 things. One, Kamala Harris did mention this on, was it Wednesday, directly to the camera about the current legislation that I want to say I forget which court it's in. Maybe it's in the Supreme Court's current docket against parts of the Affordable Care Act, especially pre-existing conditions. And she mentioned that directly to the camera. That was a pivotal moment. But also the fact that she is of South Asian descent. Is that something that has special meaning to you, or the community in which you're a part of?
I have to say that one, I think it's been great because it is a representation of a community that we've never seen at that level before in government. And the other thing is, I think just having a female on the ticket as a vice president candidate was also very empowering and motivating to me and other people. And one of my friends, it's funny, she votes, but she doesn't care much about politics. And she's never, like, she doesn't want to talk with me about politics or anyone, but she actually texted me and said, "Oh my God, did you hear Kamala Harris is the VP candidate? She's half Indian and half Jamaican, just like my nieces." She's like, "I'm so excited for them." And I was shocked because, again, she's not involved in politics at all. And I think it's important for our leaders to be representative of what the actual population looks like. We're not all Caucasian, we have people of color, and there are a lot of smart people that can hold the seat. So I think it was really smart of Joe Biden to recognize that and commit to committing to having someone on his ticket that was female. And I do think, because there's a lot of, in India, there's so many things that are going on and they're facing their own political, conflicts and crises, that having somebody with an Indian background has definitely been more of a motivating factor for them to come out and vote.
Absolutely. So we have about a minute. Is there anything else you want to share or a message to people who are listening?
Sure. One, if you feel like you are out of the norm of how your family or your community is in terms of your political beliefs, you're not alone. And you can find, if you can't find the community in real life, you can join online. There's tons of Reddit groups. There's an amazing Reddit group called Vote Dem. So VOTEDEM, and they have volunteer opportunities, like this amazing spreadsheet that they update daily. I don't know how they keep up with it, of different ways to get involved with volunteering and in a way that you feel comfortable. So look for communities like that. Look on Facebook. Karis and I are in this Facebook group called PA Women for Harris and Biden. And just the amount of support that you get and the positivity and the warmth you get from being on a forum like that, it just makes me feel better no matter how horrible I feel about whatever has come out in the news that day. And three, remember, like, your vote is your voice. And if you want your voice to be heard, you have to vote. And you should also tell and spread that to your friends and family, because if some people don't realize the importance of it until somebody closer, a trusted advisor, tells them, "Hey, this is what's on the line. You make your decision, but you really need to come out and vote."
Those are excellent points. And I think that really speaks to the work that you are doing, that you will continue to do, and how we can also bring people in, because I think people do want to do more than even their vote. They're just not sure how.
Exactly. And it's hard to find, there's so much information that's out there that sometimes it gets overwhelming. So don't give up hope.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, and Karis, maybe when you sign off, you can give some other resources of places where people can volunteer.
Absolutely. I attended a voter training that shared lots of resources. Before you go, one I'll share with you is iwillvote.com has lots of resources of confirming where people will vote, check if they're registered to vote, register to vote, vote by mail, which is a great site to even get information to vote.
And one other last thing, if people feel like they want to help and they don't have the time or bandwidth to do so, the donations that you make to especially some of the lower ballot races make a world of difference to them. So if you can't contribute with your time, consider contributing with your with donations.
Yes, and I love that plug for the lower ballot as well. The things that happen in your community happen because there are people advocating on behalf of certain causes, and it's great to even get involved in local politics.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for your time, Mamta. It has been a pleasure, and I've loved hearing the things that you're passionate about and the work that you're doing.
And thanks to Karis, you're also a really big source of inspiration to me. So
Absolutely. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.
thanks, Karis. Bye.
Bye. So, for our listeners out there, I'm going to share some of the information that I just mentioned. The site iwillvote.com is a great place to go for questions about voting. As I mentioned before, you can put in your state and then you can confirm where you're voting, check if you're registered. You may register to vote and vote by mail. And if you have any questions, or maybe you're not savvy, or you know someone else who's not savvy with the internet or technology, the phone number 1-833-336-8683. It's also available in Spanish, is a place where you can access those same resources. On that site as well, you can learn more about voting in general. And I will share out some more information about voting in Pennsylvania. The registration deadline to vote is October 19th. So you cannot register on election day. If you've never voted and you want to register to vote, you need to register by October 19th. I also believe in the city of Philadelphia, City Hall is a place where you can register. You can get a ballot. You can fill out that ballot and submit it the same day. City Hall had a line, I believe it was yesterday, around actual City Hall of people waiting in line to do any of those three things. If you need to update your voter registration, such as change your address, change your legal name, or you want to change your party affiliation, you can do that as well at pavotes.com. So other places you can register to vote: at your county voter registration office. That could be in your courthouse. Again, iwillvote.com will let you see where that is. At any PennDOT location, you can also register to vote, and other state government offices. You will need to provide your driver's license number or photo ID, or PennDOT ID, or the last four of your social security number if you don't have a valid ID. The three ways to vote in Pennsylvania for this upcoming election: 1, vote by mail; 2, early in-person voting; and 3, voting on election day. So I'll talk about those different ways. To vote by mail, you have to be registered. So if you're not yet registered, you need to register by October 19th. That is in 9 days. You also need to request a ballot to vote by mail. You also need to fill out your ballot correctly, drop it in the County Board of Elections drop-off boxes, and we'll talk more about that. The deadline to apply to vote by mail is October 27th. Again, you can register on iwillvote.com/PA, or iwillvote.com, and you can put in the drop-down menu, you can put in Pennsylvania. More information. So for voting by mail and in-person early voting. So this, I believe, is the first time, because of the pandemic, you can vote early in person. You must fill out your ballot with black or blue ink. You must place the ballot in a secrecy envelope. So this was a big deal in the courts 2 weeks ago, where Pennsylvania has these two envelopes. Your ballot goes in one envelope that is securely closed. Then you put that envelope in another return envelope. You have to fill out and sign the voter declaration on the back of the return envelope. And they say make sure to fill out the entire box for each vote, and check that your signature matches your last name on your official PA license and photo ID. So look at your photo ID or your license, make sure that the signature is the same. A provisional ballot will be given in every state for any person. It's always an option, but we consider it, or people who work to make sure that people are getting their votes in, consider it a fallback option, not a primary plan. A provisional ballot is basically when you already received a ballot, vote by mail, but maybe you lost it. So then you go to your voter place the day of the election. So they would give you a provisional ballot. So deadlines, I'll go over these again. I know we only have a few minutes left. Again, October 19th at 5 p.m. to register to vote. To register for early in-person voting or vote by mail is October 27th at 5 p.m. The municipal voting drop boxes close by 8 p.m. November 3rd. So all ballots that are mailed in must be postmarked by November 3rd at 8 p.m., almost like the taxes where they have to be postmarked by tax day. We are reminded that things may change, challenges will arise. Hopefully you either keep updated with the news on social media or from another news site. There will also be drop boxes in municipalities. In fact, Philadelphia is open many of these satellite offices. I know in the state of Texas as well, there was just a court case, I believe it was yesterday, Friday, that was decided that they can have more than one drop-off box in Texas in each county. The Republican Party wanted to have just one drop-off box. So Pennsylvania as well will have many drop-off boxes. So the drop-off boxes, you can mail it in, drop it off at the drop box, drop it off at the county board of election. Again, wear a mask when you go in. If you're voting in person, people say to bring a family member or somebody with you. Obviously, social distancing, it's always good to bring someone with you if you have to wait in line or bring something to read. I did see in that image of people waiting around City Hall, some people brought those little chairs to sit on. Check on your relatives who might be elderly, who can't get out, or maybe they need transportation, or anybody who else has transportation issues. Make sure they have a plan to vote. You may be super savvy, but there are people out there who just need a little more extra help or a nudge. If you have questions, the PA voter hotline is 1-833-PA-VOTES, and it's in Spanish as well. The website, iwillvote.com, has information as well. To find PA Dropbox locations, you can look at iwillvote.com or votespa.com to see those. So for those people who have any more questions, again, those websites, iwillvote.com. If you'd still like to get involved in the next 3 weeks, participating in any kind of volunteer efforts, go to moveon.org, or the Biden campaign is a great place to go to see all those different options. Although phone banking might seem very nerve-wracking, it's a great way to reach people who may not be on the internet or as tech savvy. And I have found that people who aren't on the internet a lot really appreciate these calls, especially during the pandemic. If you speak another language, your services are greatly, greatly appreciated and encouraged. We are reaching the end of our time today. It has been a delight and an honor to share information about being an active voter. This is something that we are lucky in this country that this is a part of being a resident, a citizen, because in many other places, this right is not given to people or it is heavily restricted. So get out there, have a plan to vote, make sure your friends have a plan to vote. If everyone can commit to texting 3 friends this weekend and making sure they have a plan, that is awesome. I hope everyone has a great weekend. I'm Karis Painter. This is Moves Unfiltered on Usala Media. Until next time.